Welcome to Virtual Networking, a Paradox. My name is Yasmin Ulrich. I'm here with Laura McGortey. Both of us are Women in Payments Global Community Council members. And we recently conducted a survey among our members to find out what their current needs and requirements are during this pandemic. And we heard you loud and clear. You are asking for material and best practices and some tips around virtual networking. So we're very pleased to be joined by Dany Eder and Morgan Saylor today to discuss virtual networking, how it can be done during the times of lockdowns and us being at home and working from home. So to kick it off with Dany, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Yasmin. Hi, Laura. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you for having me. I'm based in Frankfurt, Germany. My name is Dany Eder. I've been in Germany for over 20 years. I'm a German American, so I have divided hearts. I have an American father and a German mother, as you can, I'm sure, hear from my accent. And I've been in the payment industry, oh my Lord, way over 25 years. I'm almost dared to say almost 30 years in various roles, various institutions. Started early out in the operational area, then went into product development, sales, back to product development. And yeah, so I've done various roles in payments, and it's very dear to my heart. And I'm still in the payment industry today.
Dany, during the lockdown about 2 months ago, you not only changed your role, but you also started working for an entirely new organization. How's your experience so far doing that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me share that, because it has been quite a remarkable journey, to be honest with you. In some instances, a little bit surreal. In other instances, somehow it's become normality. So I, 1st of April, I joined Barclays Bank Ireland as head of payments and cash management for Europe. And I have a wonderful team that welcomed me very warmly under the circumstances, but they're spread out across Europe. And I wasn't able to physically be there with them at the start. As you can imagine, I thought I was going to be on a plane, jetting around Europe and meeting my team and getting to know them and really doing that bonding that you do when you're present in a room together, and the whole body language and getting to know each other. And that wasn't possible. So we had to choose other tools to do that. And I was very, very lucky that the organization I went to work for was very prepared for this event.
That sounds amazing. So you just already mentioned that it's extremely difficult to bond virtually. How do you work around that? Can you share any learnings that you've made? We all know that nothing can replace in-person interaction, but can you even bond virtually at all? Is it possible from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question. Let me first say to you that these are very interesting circumstances at the moment with this crisis, and it's a worldwide thing, right? We're all in this together. Right. So when you start the journey of trying to connect virtually, it's good to have something in common already. Do you know what I mean? It's good to have that common level playing field, so that there's that empathy that comes across right away, right? Because we're in this together. We have a common cause. So that lays a little bit the foundation. And then second of all, I think we're all in a different space in this crisis. And so that you have to use a lot of empathy with the individuals that have been in lockdown much longer. And that's the circumstances that I had to deal with. I was in a country that was a little bit later in the stage of lockdown. There was still luxury in being able to go outside. I used video, Yasmin. For the first time in my very long career, I became a big fan of video because that made it human. That's an interaction. I can see you. I can at least, visualize you, even if there's a little bit delays, but it made it more real than just a telephone call or an email. And so video was one of the things, but it was also making sure that I gave priority to my team in the journey, made them feel as if they're the number one thing that is currently on my mind. And they were, and I probably maybe went too far, but I wanted to make sure that, because, this is going to be some time we're going to have to deal with this situation. And so we may as well find a normality in how we interact with one another to create that bond. And I have to say, it's been a very interesting journey, to be honest with you, because making those appointments and calendars that are full is not so easy to do.
Absolutely.
But it's a give and take. It's a give and take.
It truly is. And I mentioned it's only been 2 months for you that you're in your situation. It's a very short time frame we're looking at, but would you be able to share with our community some best practices you found in that time frame, and maybe also some learnings? Because I know you as a very agile and adaptive person. Is there anything you maybe did wrong or could be doing better now that you reflect on those 2 months that you can share?
If I can just share an observation real quick, and then I'll answer your question. It's interesting to see in these times who is open for technology and who still is challenged by technology. And I think you have to identify that, and you have to take individuals with you on a journey, right? So how do I take away the being scared or the anxiety of using the new technology and being fearful, oh God, I'm being seen. Well, guess what? You're being seen when I'm in the room with you as well. So, how to take away that blockage. And it's not easy. And to just make it normal, right? Don't constantly stare in the camera. Don't, just be yourself in front of the tube. And it's not easy, but you can do it. And then let me tell you something. It's also, if somebody doesn't want to do the video, don't force them to do it either. Okay. Everybody's in a different journey at the moment, and a lot of this is psychologically and adapting to new situations. So don't go overboard with it as well. But really, really important, Yasmin, is for me, is finding a routine in my day, to make it, we have our routine in the office, right? We go to get breakfast, and we have our meetings, we go to our meeting rooms.
Right.
You can copy some of that as well if you find a routine, because it's critical that you don't make it all about work, right? It's because you're missing the boundaries when you're working from home, and it's quite important. But it does have advantages as well, and we shouldn't forget that, because of the hours we spend commuting to offices as well is a luxury not to have that anymore. So take the good with the bad, form a normality in your day, and know when to stop and take a break, and then obviously finish your day as well is my strong recommendation to anyone to everybody that's doing home officing at the moment. Yeah.
Great perspectives, Dany. I'm handing it over to Laura.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, excellent perspectives. So Morgan, we're so excited that you're here with us, and we had the opportunity to meet at a conference earlier this year, but why don't you share a little bit about yourself for the listeners and for our group here?
Yeah, so, well, first I just want to say thank you. So thank you, Laura and Yasmin, for inviting me to contribute to this panel discussion and to share some of the experiences that I've had since transitioning to, I guess, what we're calling the new normal. I think that the subject of virtual networking is so relevant right now, regardless of how old you are or where you are in the world. And like all of us right now tuned in are a testament to that. So I really applaud you for putting this together and making it accessible for the entire women in payments community. And so a little bit about myself. I just finished up my last few months of sophomore year at Georgetown, where we moved to a digital learning environment around mid-March. So it's been a little while, and we're finished, thankfully, now. And this past school year, my studies have been really concentrated on entrepreneurship and on fintech, which has actually proven to be pretty interesting in this time, because educators are turning to more creative alternative methods of life and of education that really utilize platforms in those spaces like Zoom or Skype or Google Hangouts and the like. And so at the moment, I'm very lucky to be in Bermuda with family and friends. I flew here at the tail end of Georgetown's spring break, and then the borders actually closed. So Bermuda is in a pretty similar situation to the rest of the world right now. The virus is definitely easier to contain because the population is a lot smaller. But at the same time, the government has taken a lot of precautions, and social distancing is definitely a norm. So I'm going to be here until the end of summer doing a virtual internship. And then hopefully I will be heading back to DC this fall to resume classes on campus.
So Morgan, you had a really interesting last end of your second semester, your second year at Georgetown, a very unusual spring semester. So could you tell us a little bit of how you navigated studies once you were fully remote, finishing up the year in Bermuda rather than Georgetown and DC? And in particular, how you stayed connected with, your peers and made new connections during that time?
Yes, definitely. It was definitely very unusual. And I think that's something that I can speak to, and that people like yourselves and our parents and our teachers can speak to, because they haven't even really had this experience before. So they can't really give us younger people advice about how to navigate it. And I did touch on this already a little bit, but I can definitely elaborate. So I think one of the things that I've noticed the most is how people my age in university, we're used to going to these huge lecture halls. So I'm used to going to an econ class with 130, 140 people in the classroom at one time. And that's just the norm for me. And now I'm living with immediate family in a house of 5, and we hardly see anyone besides ourselves. And I think this is definitely different for people depending where you are and depending on like how big your quarantine bubble is. But I think that this is a really lasting and really extreme change that's going to have implications on the way that we connect with each other for a long time. It's going to make big differences in the way that we make introductions. You know, you can't do the normal handshake, and also the way that we maintain our relationships with friends, family, partners, networking contacts that we already have. And so I think everyone definitely has different styles, but for me, probably the most challenging part of this transition would be finding some sort of routine once I did actually settle down in Bermuda. I'm on the sailing team at Georgetown, and first off, we had to say goodbye to our season a little bit early. And then second off, I had that component of my day-to-day life where I would be able to go and spend some time outside and de-stress and be with friends. And for me, being able to have that little moment to disconnect every once in a while, you know, get away from the classroom, get away from the technology, I think really benefited my learning experience and has made a huge impact on my college experience as a whole. And so transitioning to the virtual learning environment, for me, finding that time and finding that balance has been one of the hardest things, undoubtedly. And, you know, I think my professors have done a really good job of staying on track and adapting to Zoom discussions, etc. But it's very true that you lose some level of connection and value when you're having these discussions virtually. I guess school becomes a little bit more like mentally draining in a sense when you are looking at a computer screen, because you're not able to make eye contact. Earlier we were discussing how I'm an international politics major, and so as you can imagine, at Georgetown you have kids that are super far on the right and kids that are super far on the left, and they're firing off at each other in these super passionate, intense discussions. And that's what like keeps us students on the edge of our chair in school. You know, like that's what makes you want to get up and go to class. And so not having that has definitely been hard. And I think that was something that was very unexpected for me with digital learning. You know, I thought that transitioning to this, I definitely didn't think it was going to be a breeze, but I thought it would be semi easier. But like the lack of engagement definitely has reflected itself in, I guess, a secondary like lack of retention since starting school. So I do miss being on campus for sure.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. So I just want to dig into that a little bit more, because you made the point about not being able to make eye contact, the virtual connection like this. And it sounds like you're seeing that in those heated discussions, eye contact is so very important for engagement.
Yeah.
Am I understanding that?
Definitely. Like eye contact is important, body language is important. I think even like when there's awkward little technical difficulties and things, you know, when someone's Wi-Fi cuts out or something, it kind of just disrupts the flow of conversation and you lose interest for a little bit, and it takes a little while to kind of bring that back up to speed and get on track again.
Wow. So I'm wondering, and thank you for sharing that, is there anything that now that you've been at this or you had that experience for the, you know, the 2 months or so, is there anything that you have done differently once you were remote than what you did when you were in person? You know, was there any things that you did to maybe try to make up for some of those differences in your studies and your connections?
Yeah. So specifically to networking, I think that one of the biggest differences for me is transitioning to being a lot more proactive. You know, at school, we have information sessions and we have these networking events where people just kind of flock to campus. And all you have to do is spend 2 minutes signing up for the events. And then you show up and you have conversations and you kind of float around tables and meet tons of people. And that's not really possible. That's not really an option here. So if you want to have a conversation with someone, you have to start that conversation. You know, you have to either like go on LinkedIn or through a friend or a previous contact. And you have to be that person who like makes the first move, which can be a little bit intimidating, but I think it's really important to be intentional about that. And then second, another thing that I wanted to note is I think that I've definitely changed the way that like I approach the conversation. So instead of jumping into questions and answers and like a very like intellectually stimulating conversation, I start with a more like human intro, just because we don't really know like where people are right now. And I think it's important to kind of just do a little like check-in when you first get on the phone, you know, find out where that person is and how they've been adjusting to coronavirus and how coronavirus has made an impact on their lives.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Morgan, for sharing that. You have just a different perspective that I think the listenership is going to so appreciate. Dany, I'm going to go back to you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to add to that. That's a very interesting perspective, because there's one good thing that is coming out of all of this and us using this technology is that we're showing empathy for one another again. We're not getting on with one another and demanding results from the conversation, but we're taking the step first to ask truly, how are you? And listening to the answer that is coming across. So there is some good things to come out of this as well.
Totally. And especially when there is a little bit of a power dynamic, like for someone
Right.
who's a college student speaking to someone who's like a senior executive or a VP, empathy isn't something that really belongs in the conversation a lot of the time. And so being able to do this check-in definitely it kind of eliminates the hierarchy of it in a sense. And I think it makes the conversation flow a little bit easier.
Wow, that's great. Dany, I know you shared a little bit of insight with regard to remote working when you were talking about networking. But you know, that was a big change for you, right? I'm sure, to move to a new organization, take on work with a new team, plus, you know, be 100% work from home. So are there any other thoughts that you want to share with regard to the remote working? You know, anything that might be helpful for our listeners who might also be dealing with remote work for the first time themselves?
And it can be really stressful. I mean, I have many colleagues and also friends that, especially with children at home, it's been very difficult for them to manage the work-life balance. And also, it's, you know, the working from home is one thing, but also the home learning with your child and 24 hours a day, more or less, you're involved in this has made it very challenging. And I find it, though, amazing how some people, and this is my recommendation as well, some people have still found the positives in the situation. And one of the positives is that even though you can't be with one another over the video, at least you can speak to one another and see one another, and how grandparents have come together with their grandkids over video. So I see a lot of positives in the technology that that we have, and I hope that that technology continues, because digitalization is more important than ever before in the times that we live in. So embrace it, use it, get to know it. A lot of people are still frightened of it, but it's going to be a somewhat of a new norm, as Morgan was saying, for quite some time. Then there's a psychological effect, obviously, from all of this as well, but also give yourself a break, and don't work 24 hours on your laptop. I think I see that as the biggest danger in working from home and being in this kind of situation. So I encourage people to really take the time away, close it, and walk away from it, go get a cup of coffee downstairs or wherever you are. And then there's a lot of people, Laura, that don't have the luxury of having extra rooms like I have or you have in where we can do this, and in a free kind of atmosphere. For them, it is very, very challenging to find some time to do that. But I do believe that many of the organizations around the world have been very supportive of individuals with their homeschooling and so forth. And I can truly say that I worked for an organization that was well prepared for the event, and it, for many years, had built a technology foundation around working from home, as many global organizations, you and I know, have been doing this for many years. You and I both work for the same organization. So we've grown accustomed to this. And so from a business point of view, I think it's really important to delineate between what is work and what is private when you're in a work life kind of the situation working from home. I want to say one more thing, and then because this is a little bit outside of just the business world, but Laura and Yasmin, we've known each other for quite some time, and you know that I've lived in Saudi Arabia, I've lived in the United States, I've lived in Germany. I've spent my time traveling a lot, and so I have a lot of friends around the globe that I stayed connected with. And when Facebook first appeared, for me, it was a joy to reconnect with the community that I'd been out of touch with for many years. The next step then came, obviously, when we were able to see each other again after 30 years when you were in school with one another. So I have always embraced this technology, and I have always used it to its full extent. As having an American family in Augusta, Georgia, and not being able to be with them on a regular basis. For me, this is virtual networking is part of my life, I have to say. And I'm so glad, because I don't have to write letters anymore and emails and so forth, because this is much nicer. The next step is obviously getting on the plane, but yeah, it is what it is at the moment. So embrace it, be open for it, and use it. And you know what? It can be quite fun as well in the process. But yeah, it'll become a new norm for quite some time. So I think if you can't beat it, join it, right? So that's my motto. So I leave you with that thought on virtual networking as a recommendation. There's no golden key, right? Everybody experiences it a little bit differently.
So very true. Morgan, you will start an internship at a major consulting firm just next week, and then in 2022, you're graduating. So what is your outlook on career prospects if you think about the next 2 years?
Yeah, well, I think it's a little bit of a luxury to be able to be optimistic in this time. And I think that being a part of the emerging tech space kind of gives us that luxury. We kind of already hit the head on the hammer here, but I think that the space that we're in, the payments industry, it offers a really positive climate for opportunities. And more than ever, we're going to see a transition to digital payments and digital services with banking. And as people's expectations start to rise, it's going to be more and more important that we stay on top of emerging tech, and that we keep developing the infrastructure and staying on top of the regulation and the policy that enables these startups to take off. And so for me, getting involved in one of those startups, I think would be a really exciting opportunity. I think that networking is always going to be key. And I think that because the future is so uncertain right now, networking in the present and networking in the community that you already have is going to be really important. Like for me, especially because I do have an internship this summer, I want to be able to network within that firm as opposed to like reaching out and beyond. So building connections internally, and then just being a part of whatever like the newest emerging tech is.
Morgan, do you have maybe 1 or 2 action items for our community who's watching right now, something practical that they can start doing in order to advance their virtual networking?
Yeah, for sure. I think that like one of the things that I've been working on a lot has been working on like my personal brand and my personal story. All of us are newbies with the whole virtual networking thing, you know, unless you like grew up in Hollywood and have started movies, you're not really used to doing what we're doing right now, you know. Right. It doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter where you're working. This is very new for all of us, and so being able to practice speaking on a computer is something that I think is going to be really valuable. And you can start with your close friends and family, like you can start with your friends because there's no judgment there. We can laugh it off. Like it can be kind of funny when you mess up on camera. But once you have that experience and once you have that practice, kind of introducing yourself and speaking about things that are important to you, you can start to use that experience to kind of elevate your platform in the future. And maybe if a super day or an interview does happen to be virtual in the future, then at least you have like that foundation now that you can use to help you later in the future.
Like that very much, Morgan. Thank you.
Very much, very much. This was such a great conversation. I just want to say thank you first to all the listeners and viewers that are going to watch our conversation, but especially to Dany and Morgan for sharing all of your great insights and perspective. For everyone, please don't forget to follow Women in Payments on LinkedIn and provide feedback. Let us know what you'd like to dive in and learn more about going forward, and take advantage of the current no-fee membership. Thanks again for hanging out with us today.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Yasmin.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.